Bankruptcy filings have become more common in the US in the last few years, both individual and businessmen, with significant year-over-year increases reported in 2023, 2024, and 2025. This is mostly due to the financial conditions of a country, and it reflects the world as well. In the US, there has been crazy inflation where eggs can reach up to $20 for a carton, and milk can end up being over $10, which have led people to worse financial conditions than they have planned. And this reflects the world in general, because US is just a giant country that is really influential in the world. And when their finances halt, the world's finances also tend to halt. For example, the US happen to have increased in taxes for exporting and importing goods from America, from France, Japan, and many other countries. This have led to financial chaos in the world, and frankly, a lot of people have just been struggling to keep up, and their finances have been going horribly. When global financial conditions or international investors become more risk adverse, borrowing costs can shoot up suddenly because, well, they can't just pay them by themselves. They have to somehow, but they still have to somehow pay them. So what people resort to is debt. And when debt rises, when they can't pay it, then they'll have to file for bankruptcy, which is why, on my side of the house, people should go bankrupt to have their finances managed by the state for 5 years. First off, I would like to answer, what is bankruptcy? Well, bankruptcy is a legal process where someone cannot repay their debts to their debtors to go relieve all. When someone cannot repay their debts to their debtors, they go through this process to relieve some or all of their debts. It also provides a fresh financial start for those who filed for bankruptcy by creating a financial plan or helping liquidate assets so they can repay their debts. Now, I would like to clarify that when it said that a state manages someone's finances, it basically means that the state has power over the bankrupt's finances. Usually they send a manager to handle a range of financial matters, which include paying bills and managing expenses, handling tax affairs, and such. For example, you can see this already happening in the real world, not just in this hypothetical scenario. For example, individuals who lack the mental capacity, such as those with mental health syndromes or disabilities, they often struggle to manage their own financial affairs, which is why the state usually sends over a manager to help them, especially when they've filed for bankruptcy, which means their financial state is pretty bad. Yeah. So how I imagine it is that when a person files for bankruptcy, they will not be able to make their own financial decisions for 5 years. And no, this is not a bad thing, because what I meant by not being able to make their own financial decisions, I meant by themselves. That doesn't mean they have zero control over their financial decisions. Of course, a manager would be appointed, and they'd still have to work together with the manager to decide what would be best for their financial situations in that moment. And the manager would be able to help them by managing their finances. Obviously, they'd usually help them pay bills, help them liquidate assets to pay those bills. They'd handle expenses so that expenses aren't too high, and they'd still be able to pay those debts. They'd handle tax affairs, which are obviously a must do, because if you no tax evasion, guys. And for those who are currently lacking a job and an income, they can help them find a job and an income to help pay the debts faster. And for 5 years, I feel like 5 years is enough to pay those debts. And even if those debts aren't paid completely, surely the help of a financial expert in the field will be able to at least help slightly. Now, how would it look for my two arguments? Why is the state support needed? Well, first off, why does bankruptcy happen in the first place? For example, loss of income, business failure, and usually overwhelming medical expenses. Even with insurance, sometimes the debt of covering from a major illness or injury is just too much to pay for a person, and which can lead them to financial debt. And this isn't cheap financial debt. This is deep financial debt. And also, when someone has excessive spending or has poor financial planning, usually they'd buy one or two expensive items, for example, a Labubu. They'd buy one or two Labubus and they'd look at their debt and go, oh, that's manageable debt for one Labubu. And they keep buying and buying and buying and buying until their debt becomes